questions that I've got stored in for Harry. So, Harry, over to you. Thank you very much.
Oh, my pleasure. My pleasure. Uh, it's always interesting to come to talk to a new audience per se. This is the first time I've done one or two Zoom calls, but primarily this is my first time in Australia. It seems to be a week of first. I have a new client in Morocco, in India, and then a few other places. So it's been it's interesting to see how the three principles is spreading out around the world and the different levels of consciousness that the people have. Now, when I call it a spiritual psychological reality, I'm talking about you meet someone for the first time, and even though on the outside they do not appear to have what we call success, you can feel where they're coming from. And that feeling takes you away from your mental thinking, and you're using your intuitive mind or your universal mind to connect with a higher power, the spiritual being of that person. And Rowan mentions that he's working with a bit in the mental health area. Now, my speciality theoretically is addiction and the Aboriginals. I came into the three principles through the Aboriginal route. Everybody went, in Salt Spring, they all went into the psychological route, but I went into the Aboriginal route because I didn't really want to go into the psychological, and it picked me. And that's how Sid saw psychology. It picked him. He didn't just see a direction and head it out there. It picked him. And that's how my life has been. So the Aboriginals picked me, and then the addiction field picked me. And everything that I've done, I actually am totally unqualified for, which I really love, because it shows that you don't have to have any education or anything. All you need to have is a connection to spirit. That's all. And when you have that connection to spirit, life takes care of you. And going back to where I was going with Roan, so I met this client and from England and on Zoom, and he's I guess on all aspects you would classify as a loser. He's diabetic. He's mentally ill theoretically. He's taking lots of opiates and antidepressants, and when I met him, right away I could feel this guy is really got it. He really understands what we're all aiming for. He sees it really simple. See, that's the key. If you see it complicated, you're going to get lost. I promise you. I'm a pro at it, so I'm just telling you, from a veteran, you're going to get the simpler, the better. Now, of course, you've heard Sid say that many a time, but the simpler it is, that way you understand it. And so I'm talking to this guy, and every time we get together, I've been working with him for about 2 months, we go into unbelievable levels of consciousness. And we did a show recently on the nature of the principles with Bill Pettit. And Bill and I are kind of cool together. And so we did this show, and we spent a whole hour talking about the nature of the principles. But I was still a little confused, even though I could teach it. But anyone could talk about anything. So I could do that, but I didn't fully understand it. And then I'm with John, and we're talking, and then he says, the kingdom of heaven or God is within all of us. That is our true nature. And all of a sudden, that one simple sentence, I understood what the true nature of the principles are. Just from that simple little thing. I learned more from that one quote from him than I did from Bill Pettit and the group. Now, when people come on our shows, I don't let, like, Bill's a big talker. I don't let him just, type of thing. We share. And that's, that's what I would like here as well, for a feeling of sharing within it. And then we just did our final wrap-up show in Addiction, Alcoholism, and Three Principles after 3.5 years, 77 shows. And John had never spoken to anybody. And I asked him to come on the show, and he was just knocked the socks off everybody. He was so clear and so succulent and so beautiful. And the last show we were talking about, it seems like, because I'm dealing with the Eastern crowd now a little bit more, they're talking a lot about non-duality, duality. And John just said, well, that Christ just teaches non-duality. And so you just get this feeling, this guy is a superstar. Imagine him going into an area where, in mental health, where he talks and people see what he knows and they also see who he is. He'll help so many people. And that's the spiritual, psychological nature of each one of you. Each one of you have a story, an understanding. You've been blessed. You've been blessed by the best teacher. Or one of the best teachers, and you've been blessed by some kind of understanding about the three principles and what they can do to alleviate the suffering of the world. Any aspect that you alleviate any of the suffering of the world, I guarantee you Sydney Banks is sitting beside you. That's what he lived for. You should have seen the smile on his face when he went into prisons or mental health places. And it wasn't just for the rich. He really loved the poor crowd. He really helped everyone he possibly could. He'd walk down the street and he'd help people who were homeless, and he'd give them money and stuff like that. He had an understanding that when you share what you have experienced, and not more than that, just what you have experienced, it will help people immensely, especially if you have some understanding of the three principles. Now, what do I mean by a spiritual psychology? Because, of course, in today's world of the three principles, there's a lot of emphasis on the psychological makeup and the thought creates feeling type of approach to the principles type of thing. Good, very good. And then it leads to a spiritual reality. Good, very good. But that's not what Sid taught. Sid taught it's a spiritual reality right off. That's what he talked about. And when you went into that feeling of being in a spiritual reality, it psychologically helped you. So basically, spirituality is when you take your free will and you have your thought and you join with God. Sacred feeling. That's an indigenous, Aboriginal feeling. You just join with God. And then you're guided and the magic happens. And it's easy. You don't have any problems. Or most not problems. And the psychological is when you stick in your own head, use your free will to create your own impression or illusion or delusion or image of reality. That's psychology. And all you have to do to help a person is to show them, well, you're pretty cool, but God, or the universal energy of everything, is cooler. And when you get that fit, when they see that, They step out of their world of problems. See, it's really funny. I deal with a lot of people, a lot more than people realize. And they all have one problem. Everybody. I can't control my mind. I got these thoughts. I'd like to control them, and then they keep talking about the problem. So lately, all I've been doing is say, well, when you talk like that, you go there. Can you see how, if you see that, can you see how you can change your mind and head into a positive feeling? It usually takes them 2, 3, 4 meetings, and then they kind of get it. And once they get it, I say to them, you notice you didn't end up in a negative reality for the first time. They go, oh, yeah, that's right. And of course, they're looking better. They're looking younger. They're actually not talking about problems anymore. They're talking about happiness and contentment. Now, that's how Sid defined success, happiness and contentment. And someone asked him, and what else? And he broke out laughing and said, nothing else. And, you know, I don't know if you've heard Sid laugh, but it's a big one. And so that happiness and contentment solves all the problems. Now, when you get older, like I am, and let's see who else is fairly old, I can't see, you know, type of thing. Contentment becomes more important than happiness. If you're content, you don't have any problems in your head. And people say, well, that's easy for you to say, but it isn't. It's just the application of the right use of mind, the right use of the principles. That's all. Right use, wrong use. It's simple, so simple. Wrong use, problems. Right use, happiness and contentment. Which one do you want? Well, it turns out one's lots of work, frustrating, stressful, complicated, and the other one's a piece of cake because you're not using your intellect to make decisions. You'll use it if you need to, but you're not going to, it's not the driving force. So things that used to take 3 weeks to make a decision now take 3 seconds. It's just the feeling. Travel the feeling, just move on. You don't think about things, you live in the spiritual, psychological world. Or as my Moroccan guy says, in the now psychology. Isn't that cool? In the now psychology, spiritual psychology. I just love that. He said, oh, I've coined a new phrase. I said, yeah, I'm going to use it too. And that's what it's like. You just, this stuff just keeps happening, but you're not thinking about it. You're just not. It's like you have this tape recorder or going on in here, but you're not paying any attention to it, or mostly don't pay attention to it, or once in a while pay too much attention to it. All of it just doesn't matter. And then you get into an inside feeling, and it expresses itself perfectly for you. And everyone says, well, what's that? It's here. I'll try and explain that. Should I take a shot at this, Ron?
Yes, please, Harry.
Yeah. So now I mentioned to you that everyone went into psychology, and I went into the Aboriginal crowd, which I loved because they feel and think the way I do. I'm a maverick. I'm out of the box type of guy. I'm not really following. I only have one teacher, Sydney Banks. I certainly am not going to follow any of the other guys. What for? You know, type of thing, you know. I know what Sid was talking about, you know, eventually, not at first, but eventually, Might have took a little longer than most, but eventually. So eventually it happened. So I would step into the Aboriginal world, and Sid says, oh, you're a smarty. You've got a niche. Everybody else is in psychology, and here I am in the indigenous people. Well, at first, I went in and I thought, well, I have the answer to help them. Of course, that was useless. Total waste of time. They first of all have their own native spirituality and stuff. So eventually, I started getting into the mystical side of the journey with them, and I was helping a guy in prison. Never met him, but we were writing 20-page letters, and a pipe comes, a sacred pipe. Now, in the indigenous world in North America, think of a pipe like a PhD degree. It's the highest level of wisdom, acknowledged wisdom and connection to the spirit. And I started doing ceremonies with it. And when I was doing ceremonies with it, I'm going to describe the situation. So I'm up in Indian country or Aboriginal country. There's 200 Aboriginals in a circle and one white guy, me. And all the elders are there. And they're all in a circle, and I'm in the middle. And I'm performing the pipe ceremony for all of them. And this is what I said. If I think I'm dead, just dead. I said, go away. Let's get it. And then you become one. Just become one. And you share what you understand. Now, at first, I wanted to share it in an Aboriginal way, because I really understand that probably more than almost any white man alive. Maybe any white man alive, because I just don't see a difference. And of course, I don't get lost in it because I have an understanding of going inside via the three principles. But when those two worlds became one, the three principles of native spirituality, when I saw that, I was able to help. And it's the same way with spirituality and psychology. I had those two worlds separate, but when they became one, like free will, your free will and God's free will, one, then I had something to share. The other way, I had a lot of ideas, but it just wasn't happening. So the native world, the indigenous world, guided me into the mystical feeling of what I needed to find. Not you, me. You don't need to do that, but I did. And it brought me into this oneness feeling. And as the world became more spiritual, now listen to this, very important. I'm on Salt Spring Island. I'm 27, 28, 29, I can't quite remember, so far back. And I have this experience, this oneness experience. To be honest, I should have been like perfect, but it didn't include thought. So I didn't understand this world. I was always lost in my head, in my problems. But I had the spiritual understanding that everything is one. So I had a very positive attitude to my problems. And then I had an experience with Sid. And we're up at the top of a mountain. I describe it in my book, Evolution of Addiction Recovery. And I'm at the top of the mountain with Sid and his dog, Fergus. And he says to me, okay, Harry, shoot, ask me any question. Well, you can imagine the surprise on my face. not every day you get to ask any question to an enlightened human being. And this idyllic setting. And we've just spent a couple of hours together with his dog sticking his head out of my car. It had an open top type of thing and so on. And I started asking him these spiritual questions because that I understood. And he then, after each question, he answered it, it's all one. And I went, gee, this is strange. I would just answer the question, but I wouldn't include, and it's all one, how it's all connected to spirit, how it's all connected to the oneness of life. That's very important. You're not psychological beings, you know, you're spiritual psychological beings. And you can talk all you want about what you want in this physical plane, but it ain't going to get you what you want because it's empty. So I keep asking these questions, and on the 10th question, all of a sudden, now you got to remember, I'm visual. I'm not a logical thinker. I don't follow the rules. I don't do what everybody else does. I'm just not that type of guy. And I follow my intuition and my dreams and my vision. Now that's indigenous. That's the indigenous way. You know, of course you want to train them, but good luck. And so I all of a sudden, as I ask a question, I don't even remember the question. I see physically a thought go out of my mouth and into the abyss. I'm sitting like 100 million miles on top of this incredible panoramic view. I see this thought go out and boomerang right back into me as a feeling. And I went, whoo! See, that was an insight, a visual insight, spiritual insight, mystical insight, but it was psychological. See? And all of a sudden I said, who's causing all my suffering? It was a tough one, but I had to go like this. Ah, me. And after that, I had a spiritual understanding of oneness and a psychological understanding of thought creates a feeling, because thought is a boomerang. No matter what you're thinking, it boomerangs back into you immediately as a feeling. You can fool around all you want with all your negative thoughts and ideas, but all you're doing is creating suffering for yourself. Fact. You can deal with it any way you want. That's up to you. I don't care. Doesn't bother me. So now I have these two worlds, but they're not connected yet. Isn't it crazy, Rowan? Here I have, it's all one, and it's a world of thought, clear, crystal clear. But in my mind, of course, just my mind, you know, my own, they're apart. And so I don't quite see, just like the native spirituality 3P, I don't quite see how they're one. And then I happened to go to the Salt Spring School, and all of a sudden I had a question. And the question was, how come Elsie's insight is so simple? And it's psychological. It's not even spiritual, but she's a very spiritual lady and a mystical lady. How come? And I was going to ask her this question, but they got into talking about their insights, etc. And while Elsie was talking, she said, all insights are spiritual. And all of a sudden, a snake was going around, and I had 8 or 10 layers of my skin being pulled off me. And the snake was going around in me, and those two worlds became one. And when those two worlds became one, it didn't matter whether I was talking psychologically or spiritually to people, it was all the same thing. It's all the same thing. You just pick which area you want to talk about and share and so on. Like you wrote, you picked your way for now.
Yeah. Harry, what's the power for people in general? I know we talk a lot about insights. What would you say is a good way for people to create, for lack of a better word, the conditions for an insight, to get these two spiritual and psychological worlds to connect and sort of integrate? What should
Relax,
you...
relax and be patient. It's going to happen. Yeah, just relax. Stop thinking about it so much.
Yeah.
Just, yeah, we are not driving the boat. The boat is being driven for us, and we have decided that this is what we're going to do. No one can tell when an insight is going to happen. All I can tell you, it's guaranteed to happen in this lifetime or next, depending on how you live. So once I'm sitting in the car with Sid, and he says to me, this is really the biggest bummer I've ever heard in my life. He said, well, if you don't get it in this lifetime, Harry, you'll get it in the next. So eventually you're going to get it.
You're gonna get it. Harry, what if you look at your interests, or as you said, addiction chose you? Can you talk to us about how the three principles play into addiction?
Well, addiction's the same as everything else. The indigenous world was a lot more complicated than the addiction world, just to let you know. So to me, it was like, oh, this is a piece of cake, where everyone, ooh, it's a big deal. And so basically, my co-host would define you're separate. When you feel separate from universal mind, you get insecure. And when you get insecure, your natural propensity is to look for something that will make you feel good. So you go, some people might go for a walk in the woods, and they say, oh, that feels good. And other people reach for drugs or alcohol because it relieves the stress and the situation. And then it becomes a pattern, a habit for them. And then every time they feel stressed out, they reach for the bottle of beer or the shot in the arm or whatever it is. And then that becomes their life. And they start to have a lot of beliefs around it. Then they go to the doctor, of course, or the AA or whatever it is. And then they tell them they're diseased for the rest of their life. Or the doctor says this is going to be a permanent scenario type thing. So basically, it's no different than you being angry at your wife. You're angry at her because you're looking at outside circumstances that are causing you to be unhappy. And then the question happens here. I'll read. This is what John came up with. Let's see, I really like this because I was just asking him. He said, the more I saw how much I created my experience, the less I needed antidepressants and drugs.
Yeah.
So so there's the world and what it's telling you what to do. Now I worked in a heavy drug scene in Vancouver. Everyone wanted to get off the drugs. Everyone wanted to get, their situation was to get a little bit of money. They try with their willpower. See, it's a non-willpower journey. It's a wisdom journey, not a willpower journey. And you have to understand about free will, but free will isn't understood very well in 3P, so it's avoided. Sid talked about it all the time, but 3P people don't do that much, So they all want to get off it, and then they get a little bit of money, And then the habitual thoughts, which appear to be real in the moment, they bounce into it, and they're back on the street again, and all the money is gone. It's 4 months later, and they put themselves back into this recovery center, and they're in the same boat, and the process repeats again and again. So it appears that it doesn't have an answer, but the answer is really simple. Every time you get bummed out, you know, I asked a lady who was on cocaine. I said to her, "How did you get off it?" She said, "This is beautiful." She said, "When I found a better feeling than the cocaine, that's where I went." And that's the way people operate. Your people in mental health, when they find a better feeling than what they're suffering from, apparently, they'll go there. They know about happiness. They know about beauty. They know about God and wisdom, especially people who are in a suffering mode. They know a lot more spiritually than normal people. They're looking for answers, but it isn't out there. It's inside. So it's really the same thing as everything else. See, the three principles are a healing for every scenario: marriage problems, financial problems, whatever it is that's, you know, that's bugging you. Inferior, superior, you got an ego, and it appears to be dominating your reality.
Yeah.
I need a little relief from that. It's so heavy type of thing. And nobody's listening to me. And I'm so smart. I know what I'm doing. Why don't they listen? You know, and on you go. So we're all in the same boat. But the answer, in my opinion, lies in a spiritual journey to inside. You just go inside. That's all Sid ever talked about. Go inside, go inside, go inside.
Yeah.
And we're going, what's inside? Where is it? No, not the body. Well, then where is it then? Where is it? See, that's the complication, is that we're talking about an invisible, formless world. In his autobiography that hasn't been published, which I was reading the other day, it said, beyond time, space, and matter. That's the answer. But it doesn't make sense to the brain, to the intellect. And it can't.
Sorry, Harry, how did you meet Sydney Banks? Can you tell us about it? That's sort of in early days. How did you meet Sydney?
Well, in those days, it's the hippie age, eh? So it's not the world as it is now. And in those days, a lot of young people were looking for an enlightened human being to follow or to listen. And I was like that. I had no religious background. I didn't think I had a problem in the world. I had lots, but I didn't think I had any problems. And I went to a gathering with my past wife, and Sid came on, and he spoke, and he mostly talked about watch your beliefs. And you can imagine in this particular gathering where there were a lot of different trips, there were a lot of beliefs. Well, anyway, my past wife, she had an experience. I'm 10 years older than her, and I'm controlling the show. And then all of a sudden, she jumps not a few levels, maybe 50 levels of consciousness. And she experiences that there's just one, and she's not even there. And then she starts talking. This is really tough for me, man. I can't even understand what she's talking about. And I've got a big ego, the biggest in the world. I'm the king. And I can't figure out what she's talking about. And that experience along with, I saw Sid did not experience that, but I knew he was enlightened. And so we went to the island, and we started showing up, but we didn't get happy right away. It wasn't until we had an insight, especially me, when I had the spiritual insight of oneness, then it all started to make sense. So it was a special time where Sid had to take the dregs of society, a few people, and help them, and we became like a family. And the feeling was amazing. We had found the pot of gold, the treasure that everybody is looking for. Sid was obviously speaking the truth, and we would get together at his house, a big fire, beautiful panoramic view of the ocean, and his wife would come in and serve us tea. Her name was Barb Banks, beautiful, beautiful human being. And she'd go up to, when she gave the tea, has he got to the good stuff yet? No, not yet. Oh, back into the kitchen she'd go, and she'd come back a little bit later. He'd be sitting down, and then he'd get into the good stuff. And we just listened with our, it wasn't like our minds were quiet, because of course, but they're mesmerized. And people started to change all over. And we became, so it was a microcosm of taking all the worst people in the world you can imagine. And then we became the Sydney Banker Group. And there was just a few of us. And then there were more of us. And then and then all of a sudden he started to travel, started this and that. And then the psychologist came. That was the end of the Sydney Banker movement on Salt Spring, and the beginning of where you guys come in.
Yeah.
Right.
Hey, Harry, I'm going to take a back seat. I'm going to open the floor up for anyone else to share or ask questions, if that's okay with you.
Oh, yeah.
Awesome. So if you want to ask a question, just unmute yourself and go for it.
Does Mikkel have a question?
Jody, you got a question? Oh, okay. There you go. Sorry.
Hi. I'd just like to say hi, Harry, and thank you for coming on. I've spoken to you once a little while ago, and when also I think when you had Dr. Pettit on your program, and yeah, it's great listening to you. Thank you. This is my son Victor who's watching too.
Well, that's beautiful. And what did you pick up when you were listening to the show? What did you notice that we were sharing together? Did you notice, first of all, that it was a sharing rather than me telling you what to do?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Also, the way that you described how you saw things, I felt interesting, because I think I had the same or similar feeling that I feel like I don't understand sometimes what people are saying, but I'll have like an example or a vision, but I don't know if I understand what it means. I just know that I feel better later on.
You have gifts, son. Like these mystical gifts, like visions, are to be used to really help you see what you want. There are scientific clinical minds that are doing that type of work, but I'm not that type of guy. Although I'm very intelligent and highly mathematical, incredibly mathematical, but you open up to your gifts and you let them happen, and they don't always make sense, but they work. You've got to trust your own feelings with regards to them. Don't listen to other people. They've got good intentions. That you are a different apple than them. They're an orange or something like that. You need to find out your own gifts, and those gifts are special. That's why God allowed you to come here in this form. It wasn't just to tell jokes. It was, you have a special gifts. And that's what I opened up to. Oh, I see things differently than a lot of people. Oh, I have these gifts and they work. And so that's why I stepped into the Aboriginal world. I wasn't really very comfortable with the white people, especially they were so boring. 1 + 1 = 2. Okay. And after that, 2 + 1 = 3. Oh, very interesting. And we don't go farther than that. That's as complicated as we get it. Well, I wasn't interested in that. What about X, Y, and Z type of stuff, So just let yourself enjoy who you are. I mean it. Just enjoy who you are. And then the love will pour out. You won't be holding back because you think it has to be this way. I don't know much about Australia, but I know it has a lot of, my son went there and he says, oh, they all think a certain, there's a certain mentality there. Don't buy into that. You are you. I am Harry. Maybe I'm not for everyone, but nobody ever says I'm not a nice guy.
Right.
So, yeah, that's my ace, and I have have a lot of bad jokes. Boy, that really helps,
Great.
Yeah, be yourself. That's the answer for everything. Be yourself. That's all Sid ever said. Be yourself. That's what the 3 principles lead you to. Oh, I'm Harry, and it's fine. You are, whatever your name is, you are fine.
Thank you. That's Victor, by the way. Thank you.
Yeah.
That's really good.
Yeah. It makes it so much easier.
It does. It does.
And let me, now this is what the indigenous Aboriginal spirit told me. I said, well, how come I'm not helping more people? I'm talking to the spirit. Now, I'm not going to get into it. That's just inside, Just inside. That's all, But in the indigenous world, there's a little more mysticism in it. So I say this, and this is what they say to me. You do your best, and we'll take care of the rest. That's all you have to do, son. You do your best, and the spirit will take care of the rest. That's my mantra for life. And it happens to be true.
Yeah.
Because if you do your best, you know it. And if it works out, and if it doesn't work out, you still hold your head high because you couldn't do better than your best.
Yeah. That's really good.
So simple. So simple. Keep it simple.
Yeah.
It's not complicated, guys. It just seems complicated. Everything's a thought anyway, so,
Boomerang.
Yeah.
Thanks.
Thank you very much.
Oh, pleasure.
Anyone else?
Yeah, come on, ask me something. I have good answers. A little different than A, B, C stuff that you get in 3P. Yeah. You have a question, Justine?
Yeah, hello. I was just finding the unmute. Hey, how are you, Harry?
Hi, nice to see you, sweetie.
And you. Thank you for being here. Yeah, I want to ask you about, so I'm a social worker and I want to develop my own business as a coach, but use as a 3 principles practitioner. And, but I find myself having so little thinking about how to do it. I'm not like on this, like working hard, trying to make my business happen. It's almost like I have very little thought about it. and it's almost like it could very easily never happen. So from a three principles kind of perspective, when you want to look at something and make something happen, do you recommend setting aside a specific time and sitting down and asking a question of, source or of mind? Or I'm just kind of wondering how to move things ahead.
Well, you're basically listening to something, but not anything mental. So if you're missing, let's say, a few skills here or there, you get those because you see, well, they're getting in the way, type of thing. But primarily, you don't need anything with the three principles. The Aboriginals call me the psychologist. I've never taken a psychology course, ever. Mm-hmm. And I have everything that I've done since 69 on, I never did before 69, everything. So I've reinvented myself then, but I didn't actually reinvent myself, Justine. The Spirit took me there. Mm. So you have to find a place, a sacred place within yourself where you see that you're honest and genuine in what you want to be. And you also have to be patient. Mm. And that, of course, is a lot tougher for most people, type of thing. But if you have the wisdom, and here's the other one, only one that saved me was caring. I cared about people who are suffering. I really cared, and I do. And so I couldn't stop because I even though I was lost in my mind and in my thinking, and that was 40 years, Justine, I just had to keep going because I cared. And it's a caring feeling that allows you to go. You're not looking for money. Money comes. What you're looking for is experience of how you can grow in that. Mm. You start where you are. Now, I'll tell you my story because you notice I like to talk, so here goes another story. At 65, I decided I just basically do almost nothing for 4 years, and I'm just happy and content. And then I have a little talk with God, a prayer or an Aboriginal way of sharing. And I say, I'm really happy, God. I got no complaints. But I wouldn't mind a little more stimulation. I feel like I have something to share with people, and I'm not. And then I went to bed. I woke up at 9 o'clock. 9:01, the phone rang, and the guy goes, "Oh, hi, Harry. Remember me? We met 10 years ago. I'm doing this addiction recovery program on Main and Hastings, which is right in the heart of the homeless thing. The small little program, very small little program. Would you? But I've been offered another job. Would you take it over?" I go, "Oh, addiction. I hate it. Like, I work with the Indigenous, but the one area I was hopeless at was addiction." And the reason was, now listen to this, was because I was trying to fix them. So you're not there to fix people, but I was trying to fix them. Instead, so I said, well, I just prayed. Well, maybe there's a connection here. So I went and I started to talk. And it was totally different. So you'll be different as you share. And as you see your difference, you'll get inspired. So I start talking, just talking. They like it. It's not AA in the 12 steps. It's not, and they start talking about what they see. Well, these people are very spiritual. Well, I can talk spiritual with people, you know, it's my crowd type of thing. And we laugh and we have a good time. And I feel, wow. Anyway, I did that for 3.5 years.
Mhm.
You're looking for experiences,
Yeah.
not what fits into your noggin. It's a waste of time up there, baby. A waste of time. And you know it's awful boring. Oh, you've got all these, and where's the good stuff? Well, when that quiets down, you'll see where the good stuff is. It's a process of spiritual evolvement. Trust it, and it will happen. And don't look for it in a format. It might be a neighbor, it might be a person. And so, like John, who's theoretically mentally ill with all, he's getting people all over the place coming to him. You know, he's going, oh, I just was talking, you know, and he says, and I said, well, you're becoming a genius. And he starts laughing. Me? I'm a big loser. But of course he isn't. You see, a little bit goes a long way. That's a quote from Sid. A little bit goes a long way. But you cannot talk over what you have not experienced. You must not talk about and you must not talk book. Take my word for it. That's not the way. You must talk what you have experienced. Talk about your experience and how your life changed and how you saw this breath of fresh air. And that will connect with them. You see, it's this. People think when they come to me that it's this. I'm here and they're there. That's nonsense. This is the only thing that matters. Zzz, two minds becoming one. That's the healing. It's not you. It's not me. If it was me, nothing would ever happen. I promise. Nothing. It's not me. It's us. Like here, whatever feeling we have, that's the healing. When the chap felt something, that's the healing. He felt better about himself. Well, there was nothing said specifically. It's just, you don't have to prepare. I never prepare. You know, we did 77 shows on addiction, alcoholism, and the 3 principles. Greg and I. He's the subject matter expert. He is an alcoholic who had a spiritual insight. In 1 second, it all just disappeared. And then 3 years later, he came into the principles. And so we did 77 shows, and this is a bit of a joke. On the last show, I sent him an outline because we were having someone who would want to know where they should fit in. And he said, this is rather interesting because we have never done a prep. We never did a prep. We had all these interesting topics and guests, and we just let it happen. Mm-hmm. That's love. That's love. Your love will help them. That's all you have to know. Your love will help them. I'm not great, but I've noticed my love is helping some. And you get to see also, like, if they get too intellectual, I haven't got time for that anymore. So I just find an excuse to move on, you know, type of stuff. I'm looking for people who want to climb levels of consciousness, you know, want to soar a little bit, get into that feeling, where they can take me, like John, the loser, taking me into things I don't understand. It's interesting. Like, how could someone who was everything you can imagine, and then miracles happen, Justine. Like, there was a client I had, she was on the heaviest benzos. Benzos are like, she was 50 times as strong as Valium. Wow. And you're supposed to be on them for 3 weeks, and she's been on it for 3 years. And she's been on benzos and drugs since she was 13, and she's 41 now. She says, I saw you on a show, I'd like to, and she happened to live in my city. I almost have no clients in my city. It's all Zoom and all this stuff. It's kind of cool, to be honest. And so we sit down, and 2 1.5-hour sessions, of which we never even mentioned addiction or benzos. I knew so much about benzos, Rowan, that I had to write Bill Pettit and say, what are they and what do they do? And then, you know, like, I didn't even know what they were, let alone, and I'm, you know, and she dropped them.
Wow.
And then she had a meeting with her shrink, her psychiatrist, and she had this appointment. She said, well, I'm not on them anymore. She says, it's impossible. No one gets off these. But that's the way it works. I didn't do that. I didn't do that. There's no way. I didn't even know what benzos are. You know, you don't need to know anything but the principles. It's enough. It's enough. Just get clearer and clearer in your understanding, and then life will show you, like the path will clear, and you'll step up. But you have to care. You have to care.
Yeah.
I hope that helps a little bit.
It does. Thank you, Harry. That was lovely. Thank you.
Oh, my pleasure. My pleasure. It's a beautiful world, guys. Beautiful world. It's incredible. All we have to do is enjoy it. That should be easy. But we think. Excuse me.
No problem. Harry, we're at the top of the hour. I just want to take a moment to thank you for your time.
Oh, my pleasure.
Really, really enjoyed